My mother abandoned me as a baby, and my dad raised me alone until he died. Now she and her husband showed up at my engagement party, demanding to walk me down the aisle. But what I told them in front of everyone left them speechless. I'm 27 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I'm engaged to the most incredible person in the world, Blake. But there's something I need to talk about because what happened a few weeks ago basically made me explode in a way I never thought possible. My biological mother, Amanda, and her husband Scott are trying to force their way back into my life after years of not existing to me, and honestly, I'm so tired of all this shit that I need to get it out of my system. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I was like 6 months old, and Amanda decided that being a mother wasn't her thing and just left. I don't remember any of that, obviously, but my dad Michael told me when I was old enough to understand, and he told me in the most honest way possible, without trying to paint her as a monster, but also not trying to justify the unjustifiable. You know, he just gave me the facts and let me form my own opinions. My dad raised me alone for as long as I can remember, and he was amazing. Like the best father anyone could ask for. He worked in construction, long, exhausting shifts, but he always came home and made me dinner, helped me with homework, took me to the park on weekends. We had our routine, our life, and we were happy. Or at least I was happy because I didn't know I was missing something. You know what I mean? Amanda technically had court-ordered visits, like every other weekend or something, but she almost never showed up. My dad would tell me your mom can't come this weekend, she has things to do, and I'd shrug because honestly I didn't care that much. She was basically a stranger to me. What I did care about, and this made me angry even as a kid, was that Amanda constantly owed child support and never paid. My dad had to take her to court like 3 times, and she ended up going to jail twice for not paying what she owed, and I'm talking about not huge amounts, like a few $100s a month. But she just didn't do it. And my dad needed that. Money, you know? We weren't rich, we lived tight, and that child support would have helped a lot with my school stuff, my clothes, my activities. When I was like 6 years old, Amanda met Scott somewhere, I think at a bar or something, and they got married pretty quickly. Scott worked in car sales, made good money, I guess, and suddenly Amanda was all excited playing happy family with him. They had 3 kids together over the next few years, one after another, and suddenly, Amanda was this super dedicated mother with them, taking them to the park, posting photos on Facebook of their birthdays and their soccer games, and I'd see all that and think, so you can be a mother, just not with me, right? I'm not gonna lie, that hurt. It hurt a lot, but my dad was always there to remind me that I was loved, that he would choose me 1,000 times, and that was enough most of the time. Amanda still didn't follow through with visits, still owed money, and now she had the perfect excuse that we had 3 young kids to take care of, as if I didn't count, as if I wasn't also her responsibility. When I was 10 years old, something happened that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. My school organized a Father's Day event, you know, one of those things where dads come and do activities with their kids, and my dad was super excited to go. He had asked for the day off from work and everything. We had planned to go get burgers afterward. It was going to be great. But then, the day of the event, I get to school, and there's Scott, standing in the parking lot with a huge smile on his face, waiting for me. I walked up confused and asked him what he was doing there, and he told me that he and Amanda thought it would be nice if he came as my father figure, that my dad was probably busy with work, which was a lie. He never would have missed it, and that Scott wanted to start building a relationship with me. I was 10 years old, but I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what was asking. They were trying to replace my dad, make me feel like he wasn't enough. I told Scott to leave, that my dad was coming, and I went inside the school hoping Scott would get the hint. But no. The guy followed me inside, and when my dad arrived 20 minutes later, there was Scott still, trying to talk to my teachers and introduce himself as my stepfather. My dad got furious, told Scott to get lost in not-so-nice terms, and they almost got into a physical fight right there in the school cafeteria. It was humiliating. All the other kids saw the whole drama, and I just wanted the earth to swallow me. After that day, Amanda and Scott basically disappeared for a while, which was a relief, honestly. I continued with my life, school, my friends, my dad, and we were happy in our bubble of 2 people. My dad never spoke badly of Amanda in front of me. never made me feel bad for existing or for being the result of a relationship that clearly didn't work. He always made me feel loved and wanted, and that's something I value more than anything else. We had our traditions, like watching action movies on Friday nights and cooking breakfast together on Sundays, and it was those little things that made me feel like I had everything I needed. I didn't need Amanda. I didn't need Scott. I didn't need siblings I shared blood with but not history. I had my dad, and that was more than enough. But then, when I was 14 years old, my whole world collapsed. My dad died of a heart attack, super sudden, no warning. One day he was fine, joking with me about my terrible haircut, and the next day he was dead. They called me from school because he had collapsed at work. They took him to the hospital, but it was already too late. And suddenly, I was fatherless at 14 years old. I don't know how to describe that pain. I literally don't have words to explain how empty I felt, like someone had ripped half my soul out and left me bleeding. My uncles Kyle and Aaron, my dad's brothers, came immediately and took care of everything. The funeral, the legal arrangements, me, because Amanda showed up at the funeral, but basically stayed in the back, crying dramatically as if she had lost something, as if she had the right to be devastated by the death of a man she basically abandoned along with his child. At the funeral, after the ceremony, Scott approached me with this super serious expression and told me that he and Amanda had been talking and they wanted me to come live with them, that it's what my dad would have wanted, that I needed a complete family, and they could give me that. And I just stood there looking at him, in my black suit that was a bit too big because we'd bought it in a rush. And all I could think was, really? Do you really think I'm going to go live with the woman who abandoned me and the man who tried to replace my dad? I told him no, that I had already talked to Kyle and Aaron and was moving in with them, and Scott got all condescending, saying I didn't understand, that I was too young to make that decision, that Amanda was my mother and had rights. Kyle was standing right next to me and told Scott to shut up, that I had just lost my father and the last thing I needed was his manipulative speech, and that if Amanda had wanted to be my mother, she'd had 14 years to try. Scott left all offended, Amanda crying beside him, and I went home with my uncles and never looked back. Kyle and Aaron were amazing. Honestly, they took me in without thinking twice, gave me my own room, let me process my grief in my own way without pressuring me to talk if I didn't want to. Kyle is a middle school teacher, and Aaron is a nurse, and between the two of them, they managed to give me a stable life, full of love, like different from the love I had with my dad, but just as real and deep. I kept going to the same school, kept my same friends, and little by little I started to heal, or at least to learn to live with the hole that my dad's death left. In my chest. Amanda tried to contact me a few times over the next few years, text messages on my birthday, attempted calls at Christmas, but I never responded. And eventually Kyle told her legally to stop bothering me, or we'd take action, and she stopped. Scott also tried a few times, super long Facebook messages about how he wanted to be a father figure to me, how he'd made mistakes but wanted to make amends, and I'd just read them, roll my eyes, and delete them. I blocked both of them on all social media when I was like 17, and I thought that was the end of that story. I graduated high school, went to college, got my job in marketing, met Blake 3.5 years ago at a work conference. We literally bumped into each other at the breakfast buffet and both spilled our coffee. It was very romantic in retrospect, and built a life I'm proud of. Blake is incredible, understands me in a way no one else does, knows my whole history with Amanda and Scott, and has never judged me for my complicated feelings about all of it. We got engaged 6 months ago. It was perfect, beach proposal at sunset and the whole cheesy package, and we're planning the wedding for next summer. Kyle and Aaron are going to walk me down the aisle, both of them together, because I couldn't choose between them and because they both raised me and saved me and deserve that honor. I didn't invite Amanda or Scott, obviously, and honestly, I thought I'd never have to deal with them again. But then, like 3 weeks ago, I went to my cousin Sarah's birthday, my Aunt Linda's daughter on my dad's side. Sarah was turning 30 and had organized a big party at an event hall, like with a DJ and open bar and the whole deal, and I went with Blake because we love any excuse to dress up and dance. The party was going well. We were having a great time. And then I saw them, Amanda and Scott, standing by the gift table, talking to some relatives, and turns out Linda had invited them because technically, Amanda is still family, because of me. And Linda is one of those people who believe in keeping family peace and giving second chances and all that crap. I tensed up immediately. Blake noticed my mood change and asked if I was okay, and I just nodded and said I was going to stay as far away from them as possible for the rest of the night. And it worked for like 2 hours. We danced, ate, had a couple drinks, and I successfully avoided them. But then Scott approached me. I was standing at the bar waiting for another whiskey and Coke when I felt him get beside me, too close, invading my personal space, in that way people do when they want to force intimacy that doesn't exist. He said, "Hi, Jordan. You look good, very grown up now," and I muttered a curt thanks without looking at him. But Scott didn't get the hint, obviously, because he kept talking about how it had been a long time, how he and Amanda had been thinking about me a lot, how their 3 kids ask about their older brother they never really knew. And I just stood there thinking, please let this guy shut up and leave. But no, Scott kept talking, and then he dropped the bomb. He told me he'd heard I was getting married. Congratulations, by the way. And that he wanted to ask me something important, something that would mean a lot to him and Amanda. I turned to look at him confused, and Scott had this hopeful smile on his face, and he told me, "I'd like to walk you down the aisle at your wedding. I know your dad isn't here to do it, and I know I've been in your life for a long time, and it would be an honor for me to take that role." I froze. I literally couldn't process what I'd just heard. This man, who tried to replace my dad when I was 10 years old, who disappeared from my life for years, who only showed up when it was convenient for him, was asking me to let him walk me down the aisle at my wedding, the most important day of my life, as if he had any right to be there. The rage I felt in that moment was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Like I could feel my heart beating in my ears, my hands shaking, my vision narrowing. I told him, in the calmest voice I could muster. No, definitely not. That Kyle and Aaron were going to walk me because they actually raised me. They actually were there when my dad died. They actually deserved that honor. Scott got all defensive, saying he had tried to be there, that I had rejected him, that he and Amanda had wanted to be part of my life, but I wouldn't let them. And something in me just exploded. I told him, raising my voice more than I intended. How dare he? How dare he stand in front of me and claim any kind of parental role when he'd never done anything to earn that right? People around started to notice. Conversations died down, and I could feel everyone staring. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. I told him that Amanda abandoned me when I was a baby, that she spent years not fulfilling her court-ordered visits, that she went to jail twice for not paying child support, that my dad literally worked himself to death to give me a good life while she played perfect family with Scott and her other kids. I told him that Scott tried to replace my dad when I was 10 years old, that he ruined my school Father's Day event, that they showed up at my dad's funeral with the audacity to offer me a place in their home as if I owed them something. I told him I had a family, that my dad was the best father in the world, and that when I lost him, Kyle and Aaron saved me, and that they are my family, not him. Not Amanda. Never them. Scott was standing there with his mouth open. Amanda had appeared at some point and was crying, and the whole party was in complete silence watching the drama unfold. Blake came over and put their hand on my shoulder, like reminding me they were there, that they supported me, and that gave me the final push I needed. I told Scott to stay away from me, that I never wanted to see him again, that he wasn't invited to my wedding, that he wasn't part of my life, and never would be. And then I turned around and walked out of the hall, Blake following me, leaving Scott and Amanda standing there in the middle of the chaos they'd created. We left the party, didn't stay for cake or goodbyes, just left. And in the car ride home, I was shaking with adrenaline and rage and relief from having finally said everything I needed to say. I thought that would be the end, honestly. I thought that after that public scene, Scott and Amanda would finally get the message and leave me alone. But no. 3 days later, Amanda called me. I don't know how she got my new number. Probably some well-meaning but misinformed relative gave it to her, and when I saw her name on the screen, my stomach sank. I answered, I don't know why. I guess part of me was curious what shit she was going to say now. And basically, she yelled at me for 5 minutes straight about how I had publicly humiliated her, how she was my mother and deserved respect, how everything she'd done in her life had been for my benefit. how I was ungrateful and didn't understand the sacrifices she'd made. I asked her what sacrifices exactly she'd made for me, and she couldn't answer, just kept yelling about respect and family and obligations. I told her that she stopped being my mother when she abandoned me at 6 months old, that she couldn't show up 26 years later and claim a title she never earned, and that if she wanted respect, she should have started by respecting me and respecting my dad when he was alive. I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number, and thought that now this is over. But a week ago, just when I thought things had gone back to normal, Scott showed up at my apartment. I was in pajamas watching Netflix on a Saturday afternoon. Blake had gone to visit their family, and suddenly the doorbell rings. I look through the peephole, and there's Scott, standing in my hallway with a super serious expression. I didn't open the door. I yelled through it for him to leave, that I was going to call the police if he didn't go. But he started talking through the door about how we needed to have an adult conversation, how I was being irrational and letting the pain of losing my father cloud my judgment, how he and Amanda just wanted what was best for me. I told him he had 10 seconds to leave before I called the police. I started counting out loud, and when I got to 8, I threw the door open, told him to fuck off, to stop harassing me, that I had the right to choose who was in my life, and they definitely weren't chosen, and I slammed the door in his face. I heard his footsteps finally walking away, and I slid down against the door, shaking with rage and fear, because honestly, I didn't know how far he'd be willing to go. I told Blake everything when they got back that night, and they said we should consider a restraining order if Scott keeps showing up. Kyle and Aaron are furious too. Kyle sent Amanda a message making it clear that if she or Scott try to contact me again, we'll take legal action, and so far they've stopped trying, at least for now. I blocked Scott from everything, changed my privacy settings on all my social media, and I'm seriously considering moving to a building with better security, because honestly, I don't feel completely safe, knowing Scott knows where I live. The wedding is still planned for next summer. Kyle and Aaron are going to walk me down the aisle, and it's going to be perfect without Amanda and Scott there ruining it with their presence. Blake and I are excited, despite all this recent drama. And I know that day is going to be about celebrating love and real family, the family we choose and that chooses us back. Sometimes I still think about all this and wonder if I'm being too harsh, if I should try to have some kind of relationship with Amanda because technically she's my biological mother. But then I remember everything that happened, all the pain and abandonment, and I know I'm making the right decision. I don't owe Amanda anything. I don't owe Scott anything. And I have every right in the world to protect my peace and my happiness by cutting them out of my life permanently.